Welcome everyone to this next episode of the Analytic Mind podcast. Today I have a exciting guest with us, Shiv Misra. Now, Shiv has experience in working in a range of large organizations, and at the moment is working as the head of data science and analytics at Aetna. I think that's how you pronounce it, isn't it, Shiv?
That is correct.
Yeah, which is part of as a portfolio company of CVS, which is a huge multinational in the US. But I'm not going to do an intro as much justice as you will, Shiv. So why don't I throw it over to you and maybe just give us a bit of background around what you've done in the data space and what you're doing now.
Absolutely happy to do that, Sam. And thank you so much for reaching out. I always like talking to individuals within the space because I always feel like, I share my experience and get to learn a ton more. So happy to do that. So my data science and analytics journey started a pretty long time back. It started with a company called as WNS. And my first ever exposure to analytics was with Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola was my client, and it basically started by cleaning their databases. These were their marketing and brand databases for top 32 countries. And one might believe that for a large organization, all the data would be like in sync with each other, and it would be much easier to gather insights. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And I think that's where I basically got into the nuances of how different data points are connected to each other, and what is the importance of having clean and harmonized data sets. So started there, once we cleaned the data, once we had our ducks in a row, we basically started working on analytics for Coca-Cola, creating about 250 to 300 slides. Now, all this time I was in Bangalore in India, and I was basically sending these insights out to Atlanta headquarters. Soon I realized my stakeholders did not really have too much time to go through 300 slides. Now, these were the marketing leadership team members, including the chief marketing officer at the time. So I went back, I created a summary view, and basically kind of started telling the story. And I think that was my I would say first success within analytics. Eventually, I ended up coming to the US, worked in Atlanta, the Coca-Cola headquarters. From there, moved on to work for Dell Computers as a consultant. Now, with Dell, it was almost like a 180 degree to what I did with Coca-Cola, because Dell is a very digital organization. So my work there was around digital e-commerce, multi-touch attribution models, machine learning for their services portfolio. So it was very exciting. From there, I went on to start analytics for a lottery company. Then moved on to PayPal. PayPal is also a pretty, data and technology company. It's a I would say one of the most data savvy organizations that I've worked with. But my role there was very interesting too, because my role there was to basically embed decision sciences within the organization. So one would imagine PayPal would have a lot of people using data, but the problem there was a lot of people were using data, but they were using their own analysis. To centralize all of it was a challenge. So had an exciting time at PayPal. Then moved on to start analytics and data science for Heineken, the beer company in their US business. Then eventually moved on to Hilton Hotels to start their marketing and digital analytics practice. So that was my last role. And within Hilton, my team was in the US, but I also had a team in Asia Pacific, which was based out of Singapore, covering all the way from Oceania to basically Southeast Asia and China and Japan. So then I had a team in London, basically responsible for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And then, of course, I had a team in the US. So did that for about a year and a half, and then the pandemic happened. So eventually, made a move to healthcare. So very excited about my current role. So part of, as you said, a Fortune 5 company, CVS Health. And within CVS, my focus is on Medicare retention. So Medicare is a large part of our business. And it's also like the one that I very like I like very closely connect with, like especially during the crisis. We have seen that how disproportionate the impact has been to our
Mm,
senior population, which is
mm,
65 and older. So there was this chance for me to kind of go in and try and use data science and analytics to basically talk about better products, better experience for our members, and try and find out ways that helps our members on their path to better health. So that's what
mm,
I'm doing currently.
mm.
So it was a very
That
long introduction.
is no, that was great. I mean, it's amazing to be able to connect, closer with people like yourselves. Who, I mean, your experience spans top level brand after top level brand, and there's just so much good stuff that we could dive into around all of these organizations that you've had exposure to. One of the
Appreciate
things
it.
that sticks with my mind, sticks out to me is
Uh-huh.
how have over time have you seen the importance of analytics become in these organizations? Because obviously, you've been doing it for some time now, all the way back when
Yeah.
you were doing some work with Coke. So I mean, I've got my personal view on this, and I'm sure a
Uh-huh.
lot of our listeners do, but what are you actually seeing at the coalface?
That's a wonderful question, Sam. So I would say, when I started my analytics journey, at the time, analytics was not even a term that was popular. So people did not really know what analytics was.
Mm-hmm,
If you Googled it, probably you would have gotten a definition.
mm-hmm,
But it was very new. Now, was the work itself new? No, it wasn't. I don't think the work has not existed before I started. So we've had artificial intelligence and the concept back in the day with the Turing test, right? So it's like statistics, biostatistics, quantitative analytics, research and insights. So those functions have been there, and those have been working on parts and pockets of what data science and analytics has now evolved to be. Now, what has changed is initially, right? Companies had smaller teams that were supporting particular function. Like for example, marketing would have a research and insights function, that will do the surveys, collect the data, and bring it back to the organization. Finance would have their forecasting team and financial planning and analysis team. Then operations and supply chain will have their small team. So there were a lot of teams that existed in the past. What was truly missing is if you were sitting with a large organization as one of their global heads, what was missing was that you did not, as the president of a let's say a Coca-Cola, had an integrated view of how your company is performing across all your portfolio and all your verticals. So that integrated view was missing. And what also was missing was a lot of times the decisions that were being made, especially at the C level, were decisions based out of experience, were based out of what this particular leader has done and seen in the past. And sometimes what happened was when this particular leader left the organization, companies were literally scrambling to basically find out what should they do next. What data science and analytics has done now is made all these decisions very, very scientific. So yes, still I think there's a lot of value in experience, and there's a lot of value in gut feeling and gut based decisions. But what has slowly started happening across very large organizations is these decisions are backed by robust analytics, by robust data science. And even if, let's say, there's a movement in the leadership team, what the organizations create in form of data lake, in form of insights, they kind of still can support the new leadership team. So what it has done is it has made organizations more resilient. It has made decisions much faster and more explainable to the street, to the investors. But I would love to hear your view there, Sam.
Well, I really like the term you use, resilient, because you can see the fragility of a historically of a business where all of the, say, IP was caught up within the mind of a few senior leadership, few people from the senior leadership group. But when you embed that framework, that decision framework more into a product or a process, that as a whole makes the organization more resilient. Because if there is changes in personnel, changes in resources, well, the decision making, the way that decisions are being made, theoretically won't change as much, which I think is great. That is a truly great insight.
Awesome.
Yeah. Now let's move on because I think that is
Sure.
that is a great some great thoughts to sort of kick off the conversation, because you, as a sort of a data analyst or someone who's been involved in data for a while now across lots of different brands, you've got these unique insights from other people you've worked with, or some of the infrastructure that has been built up around these data assets within organizations. What do you think is the big difference between, say, a Dell that you said was really data savvy, to maybe one of the other organizations which maybe didn't have as much of this infrastructure built up?
Great question. So I think there are like a couple of things there, right? Like number one, is what is the analytics and data maturity of an organization? So that basically differentiates how they use data science and analytics. But I think number two is how much of an appetite does an organization have for change? Because what happens with data science and analytics is once you start running those models, when you start coming up with insights and go back to the business must have an appetite to try something new, try something that is different from how they have worked on things. Now, even at Dell Computers, when we created their first lead scoring model, and I went out to basically sit down with the sales organization and convince them to start using our leads, I still was met with resistance. And because it's a law of physics, what we call as inertia, there is a resistance to change, and that pretty much holds very good with large organizations because they have done things a certain way. And when people come from outside, especially within data science and analytics being a new field, people are not that open to changing, because they are why would you want to disturb what's good for us? That's where you have to kind of work and show small wins and small successes. So basically, instead of going out at Adele, for example, with the entire North American market, we went out with a small town in Texas, and we were let's start there. Let's try and see what is the conversion rate for these leads that we are giving you, and what is the conversion rate that you have for your own leads. And once they saw that success, we created hero communication strategy, meaning you create heroes within the organization and basically inspire them to adopt change. Now, I think data science and analytics leadership team, particularly in my experience, I've seen our job is not just to create models. Our job is not just to impress the C level. Our job is not just to kind of hire and train 50, 100 people. Our job is to basically drive change. And driving change, I think, is a skill that is a must-have for a data science leadership team member. Because what I've seen over the past 15 years is it's very important to basically be able to not go in with a mindset of, hey, my models are awesome, or our analytical tools are amazing. The mindset that anybody who's leading a data science team should be, hey, I'm here to make the business win, and here's how I propose we do that. And then go and talk with the business and try and understand what is their constraint, what is it that is keeping them from making a change, and then work with them to basically show successes and then embed the change in the larger part of the organization. So the difference between Dell, for example, or Coca-Cola or a PayPal was very much based on the fact on what their appetite for data science was versus their maturity. Like one of my prior companies, IGT or GTech, or even my current company, CVS, we have made a huge progress over the last X number of years in data science and analytics. And the appetite is humongous. We are a data driven organization. Now,
Mm.
Medicare retention is a new function. So I'm basically building my team from scratch.
Mhm.
However, I've not seen that lack of advanced analytic tools come in the way of organizations stop asking for data or data backed decisions. So I think
Mm.
the most important thing is the appetite for change that organizations should have when they adopt data science and analytics.
Yeah, I love that, and that is a huge theme that is coming out from all the conversations that I'm having,
Mhm.
and I think it's a trap that a lot of analysts and data scientists can fall into. That you always revert back to the tools. The tools are the enablers, and yes, I think they are part of the puzzle, but it's also the people. It's also the communication that is equally as important. You almost have to sell internally what you're doing as well, and having a strategy around that is incredibly important. Also,
Exactly.
I love two other things that you mentioned, which I just want to highlight. Is I
Sure.
like the starting small. How you instead analytics is this there's this huge world of opportunities, but I think you've got to in a lot of cases really break it down into something small and iterate from that initial
Exactly.
buzz that you build, or initial prototype that you build. And I think there's nothing wrong with that as well. Yes, maybe you want to have some overarching strategy that you're long, over the long term you're trying to aim towards, but there's nothing wrong with planting a seed somewhere and just trying to let that grow and nurturing it as it grows.
Yep. That's a
and
good
and the other
point.
point,
Yeah.
yeah, the other point is I love this term of hero. What was it? Was it like hero people or hero
Yeah, like you can call them analytics heroes within the organization. So
analytics
these are
heroes?
the
Yeah,
ones,
yeah,
these are the ones who are your early adopters and who are the one,
yeah.
these are the ones who basically become your champions and advocates,
Champions,
and
yeah,
you need them.
sponsors, yeah,
You need them.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. No, that is another key theme that I'm seeing a lot, and especially if you're trying to really change the culture within your organization, it's important to
Exactly.
bring together lots of people from all different areas to buy into the strategy, to buy into what you're doing. And on a previous episode, we talked about actually, having an event, having a summit, if
Nice.
getting
Yep.
everyone together with cutting out 2 days of their in their calendar and having everyone really focus in on it. And I think, especially in really large organizations,
Mhm.
of thousands of people, I think that's how you got to do it. I have a feeling that that's where you get the largest impact in the shortest amount of time.
Exactly.
You think sort of similar in a similar way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the culture change happens across all levels. And
Hmm.
sometimes the trap that we all fall in is we feel like you just go to the C level or to the executive leadership and work with them and the culture will change overnight. And it does not happen like that. To your point, you
Hmm.
actually have to drive people across all levels to come and at least be curious about what we are working on, and then show
Mm.
them what exactly do they gain when they adopt. Meaning some people I've seen are I should not use the word scared, but they are a bit skeptical of why exactly are we automating stuff? Does that
Hmm.
impact my job? And that's where you need to kind of have a conviction that this is basically to save you time so that you can focus on things that a computer cannot focus on. So for example, instead of you doing the forecasting, let's manage the forecasting model centrally, and you sit down and integrate what is happening with competition, what is happening in the local market, what is happening with the products, and come up with a story which is actionable. So these as I said, I call them heroes or call them early adopters. These are the ones who go out there and they are the ones who are driving organization level change. So yeah, it's definitely important to kind of stop and ponder.
Mm.
I'm not super big on I'm not super big on summits.
Hmm.
I think summits are a good idea, but they have to be planned very, very well. So I've seen
Mm.
in my past experience, I've with large organizations, I've seen some summits to be amazingly awesome, and some summits
Mm.
to be kind of people come out and say that, oh, I could have used that time better. So
Yeah,
they have
right.
to be planned very well. They have to be or people should go into a summit with a very robust and well-defined goal. What exactly do you expect from it? If you're going there to just have fun and maybe learn a few things, that's good, but that's not the best ROI for a summit like that on that scale. But if you're going
Mm.
there to basically make a connection, get inspired, and come back and work on something actionable, that is the one that I would definitely put all my money in, because that is the one that is going to have a big impact on the culture of the organization.
Mm. Yeah, I think the word you just mentioned, inspiration. If you've got to use an event like that to
Yeah,
inspire what's
yeah,
possible, and
agree.
if you can embed that into everyone's mind who
Yeah,
is in attendance, I think that's where you'll get the greatest impact longer, medium term, longer term.
yeah,
One of the interesting things you just mentioned as well is when you do try to get everyone engaged in your analytics effort, a lot of pushback happens because
yeah,
everyone's seeing that their job is being automated, and they're going to be and
yeah,
they're like, oh, what are we going to do? And I think,
yeah.
and I personally I've seen this, when I've historically done say a live training, you know,
Uh-huh.
you get users who maybe are Excel users, and then they see, oh, this is what Power BI can do, and you can automate a lot of what you're doing, and they're like, well, this is what I spend half my week doing, historically. So why would I want to automate it? I won't have
Yeah,
anything to do. I think what is equally important there when you're
uh-huh.
showcasing these new tools is you also have to sell the world of analytical opportunities that you're opening up.
Mm.
The
Yeah,
value the additional value you can extract from your data and your data assets. And I
I
think
like
that
that.
they both need to be done at the same time. And so
Yeah,
you've got to have a plan for that. Because you don't want to switch anyone off out of fear. You want to make
yeah,
sure that they stay engaged and they see the world of opportunities. I believe, and it would be interesting to get your view on this, that in terms of the value that can be extracted from data in practically any organization of any size, uh,
uh-huh.
we're probably not even touching 10 to 20% of what is actually possible,
Yeah,
when you really embed a completely data driven culture within a team, within an organization.
yeah. No, that's such a good point, because again, as I said, all organizations are different in terms of the analytics maturity, and some have made a much bigger dent versus others in terms of
Hmm.
how much data are they using. But again, I would say when we talk about people adopting and people making decisions based on data, and about how to kind of expose them to automation and how to kind of explain to them how this is making their life much better. So basically, to your point, introduction to the world of analytics.
Hmm.
That's when you realize the people who have been in the business for a long time and who now have opened their minds up to analytics and data science and are actually learning stuff there. I feel and I think there's a term for it somewhere. I've heard we call them as citizen data scientists. So
Yes.
these are the folks that I've seen have the most productive impact because their robust background in the business combined with their ability to make a decision much faster or much more robust using data makes them like superstars. So I have a ton of respect for such experienced employees who basically open up to analytics. And in my experience, like all my team members that I had inherited from different parts of the organization, who were amazingly passionate about doing the business and operations, and who actually also learned analytics. In my experience, those were like all superstars. Those were all high, above average or sometimes excellent performers. And they are the ones who are like, who basically, once they kind of jump onto the ship of analytics, their growth within the organization is exponential. Like, it's much, much faster than anyone else, because if you think about it, like, you hire the best data science and analytics talent from outside, they still have a learning curve to understand the business. And sometimes, like, they just get too involved with their data world that, like, it's very hard for them to disconnect and, like, go and learn how day-to-day business happens. And which means, like, their insights might be amazing, they are not always actionable. But for somebody who's been within the business and now has learned this, they become, like, super powerful, because they know exactly what part of the business is open to changing, what part of the business is having a problem, and what exactly can this solve in next 3 months versus what can this solve in the next 12 months. So my tip to all data science leaders is, like, when you start a new team, or once you kind of build a function within the organization, try and look for these purple squirrels or unicorns, like, the ones who are in the business, who are amazing business people, and they're open to learning about analytics. Bring them on your team and, like, make them leaders on your team, because they will inspire, like, a lot many people.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that. I love that term, citizen data scientist. I heard that not
Yeah.
the other week, actually, for the first time. But
Nice.
I
Yep.
think it really encapsulates where you want to, who you want to target your energies on to get those internal sponsors. To get
Exactly.
those users who you can collaborate with and who will really push. They'll be the most engaged, and they'll really push your initiatives down to all levels and all layers of the organization. Shiv, what I want to maybe do now is just switch a little bit, and
Sure.
I'd love, because you mentioned this in your earlier answer, is that you want to really showcase the value in terms of what's possible, right?
Yeah.
To the business. And what I think would be really valuable is to maybe talk to some of the analytics initiatives that you have done historically, that,
Mhm.
and you can talk broadly, it doesn't have to be specific, but just broadly, what initiatives had the biggest impact, like really moved the needle. And these could be great ideas that listeners and others um, could take, to that they could go and pursue something quite similar, and hopefully be able to showcase a similar amount of value.
Absolutely happy to do that. I'll maybe, like, talk about two or three examples.
Yeah.
So first one is actually pretty simple. And I think simple is like a word that is underappreciated within data science and analytics. Everybody's chasing those complex models, machine learning, deep learning. But this one is a simple example. Now, this is from my time at Heineken, where, as I said, like, I started the data science and analytics function. And when you start a new team, you have to convince your C level, especially the CFO, about each and every investment that they're going to make in your team. And that can be like a resource investment, like a human resource, or a technology that you want for them to invest in. And when you do that, like, you have to quantify, like, the value that you bring back to the organization. And being a new team, I did not really have too much time on my hand to go and build like a complex model and, like, come back and show to my CFO that here's, like, $100 million that we saved, or something like that. So what I did was, within alcoholic beverage industry, it is very hard for us to, actually not just hard, it's impossible for us to have retailer level data, because in the United States we are not allowed, like, alcoholic beverage companies are not allowed to sell directly to retailers. So we must sell to distributors, and then distributors sell to retailers. So we did not really know that this particular shop across the street was running out of a Heineken, let's say 12 pack. So what I did was, I used my background from Coca-Cola, which is, like, the data that we collected from Nielsen, at the retailer level, the shopper panel data. And I basically married that data with our shipment data and created a forecast of what shop will run out of stock. Now, that forecast was about 80, 85% accurate. So not really your most accurate model. But within a few months, we were able to kind of, fill those stocks and basically save or bring net new revenue of about 60-65 million dollars. So it's a very simple exercise. But I think the lesson there that I would like to share is, do not chase the most sophisticated models. Chase your low hanging fruits, especially when you have to go back to the C level and show to them the value. Chase something that is actionable. Chase something that the sales team will willingly accept with open arms, and go and act on what you are saying. And because that is when you see the true impact and immediate impact of what you're working on. That is number one.
I
Number two
really, I
is
really, I, re- I
yeah,
really like that, Shiv. The one
sure.
thing that really sticks out for me there
Uh-huh.
is that analytics can almost be a creative pursuit. It's
Exactly.
almost like
Yeah.
an artist. If you can bring a bit of creativity, thinking outside the box, there's enormous value just right there. And it doesn't even
Exactly.
need to be a hugely complex model or piece of work like you've said.
Exactly. That is well summarized. Yeah, it is very, very creative. Like, that's one reason why keep telling my team that take take breaks, go for a walk, because it's pretty much like any other creative field, right? Like,
Mm,
when you are a writer, you hit your creative block, where you can't really think, and and same goes when you're an artist. Same goes when you are a data scientist. You have to have those breaks. You have to give your mental health the topmost priority, because only with a clear brain you can be creative and think of innovative ideas, and always have a north star. My north star was, I have to show value. And the value cannot be shown and I also was like maybe two member team, so my team was pretty small. So with a small team, with an impact focus, that is what I could have done in 3 months, and then eventually when we convinced the leadership, we got more investment, and we actually ended up building the first commercial effectiveness model within the CPG industry, at Heineken. So yeah, that was one. Second, I
great.
would like to share an example from PayPal. So
Hmm.
my team within PayPal was called as Decision Sciences, and we had some of the best talent that you could think of, within data science and analytics in the industry on our team. But the challenge was, our our focus was on delivering accurate and timely solutions, which is great. But sometimes what happened was, we looked at our solutions from the lens that we had as a decision science or a data science team. We sometimes did not hear enough of what our stakeholders told us about what was missing. So one example there was, we were trying to create campaign measurement tools which were 95% or more accurate, which is kind of standard best practice, uh, but then I sat down with the marketing team, and they were like, hey Shiv, your solutions come to us after our campaigns are over, and it takes about 3 weeks for your team to pull it all together, and by the time we already have planned the new campaign. I was like, okay, what will it take for us to create a slightly less accurate solution, but which is much more timely, so that when marketing is planning their next campaign, they can actually look at what is happening from the current campaign. So basically making them more and more intelligent and giving them that competitive edge. More importantly, if you're running a campaign online, it makes much more sense for you to know every hour how your campaign is doing, because sometimes an online campaign will not perform because the link was broken. So it was not because the campaign was poorly planned, because the website had a glitch. So we created the first ever real-time campaign optimization dashboard at PayPal. PayPal actually gave us an award for that, because that was never done until then, because people were too scared of compromising accuracy. But the impact from that dashboard was phenomenal, because every hour of a website being down could cost an organization millions of dollars in revenue generated from the campaign. So which actually we saw that there was once when the traffic did not come for like 2 hours, and we went back and we saw the link was broken. We fixed the link. We calculated the leakage to show to the organization what is that we've saved, and people were like just amazed. So the learning there is like like try and like put yourself in the shoes of your stakeholders, and try and like give them solutions that you as that stakeholder would have wanted. Don't give them solutions that you feel as a data scientist are, are good for them. So
Mm.
it's yeah, it really helped us there.
Yeah, I love those two examples, and to me they really just highlight the value that can be generated, the impact that you can have, almost building an analytics product or an analytics solution.
Yeah,
It's just like a product manager is designing new products for, say, an organization
exactly.
or a software company. From I look at sort of the analytics space as more you're bringing the optimization to what you're doing internally, and you almost it's exactly the same. You need to sort of product manage your optimization,
Right.
and those two examples highlight just how big an impact you can have, and how much more there is to unlock, which I briefly touched upon earlier. What I also think would be really interesting, Shib, is
Uh-huh.
what tools have you used in the past or are currently using, because I presume it's not just one tool, it's maybe a suite of tools to
Yeah.
actually deliver these analytics solutions to the business.
Yeah. No, good question. So the tools that I have been using, like like back in the day, we had SPSS and business objects,
Hmm. Yep.
and like
We've
even
come a
before
long
that.
way. We've come a long way since then.
Exactly. Exactly. And then we had like the whole phase of SAS. Like SAS was like the go-to tool for statisticians across like a lot of companies.
Mhm.
And like ever since then, like we've seen a lot of open source. Like we all like saw R, and like R was amazing. So I used R, but like slowly and surely Python has like now become the choice, the language of choice for not just modeling but also for data prep. So
Mhm.
SQL, like Oracle SQL, Teradata, like MS SQL is also like I would say like a very important language for people to just get the data out of their systems. Like now we have Hadoop and Hive. So HQL, like I think it's important to kind of know at least one good data query language. So if you know SQL, I think it is really needed, and it's important to know at least one. Uh, I would say statistical modeling tool. Like it can be like an open source, which is like R or Python, or
Mhm.
it could also be like a drag and drop, like H2O, or like a solution from Databricks,
Mhm.
or like even SAS today. So one data query and one data modeling tool. These are the two things that you must have, and I think
Mm.
the most important thing ever is people should know the basics of quantitative and statistics. So like so mathematics and statistics are what you must know. Like tool could change, but the principles should not change. Like a lot of like young starters within data science and analytics people, like when I interview them, when I ask them like how do they check for a particular feature, and like do a particular test, like they basically give me the code for Python, and I'm like, no, do not give me the code. Tell me the logic behind the code, because the logic is the one that has brought people like me and like a lot of us like this far, and logic is the one that will not change. Tool is there to make it faster and more efficient, but you need to have your basics in statistics and mathematics very clear. So that
Mm.
is non-negotiable. Tool can change, like you have to be a learner,
Mhm.
but like if you do not know how to differentiate between correlation and causation, that's where you need to kind of go back and pick the book and learn that.
Right. I'm interested to know
Uh-huh.
how are you stitching all of these together to create an overall solution. I think it'd be interesting to dive into that.
Solution for myself or for the business?
for the business. So
For the
you've
business.
got
Got it. Yeah.
you've obviously the data is collected and placed
Yeah.
somewhere. Then
Yeah.
you query it, you analyze it, you visualize it.
Correct.
What is your preferred way of stitching all of those parts
Yeah.
together?
Got it. Yeah. So it's a good question. I think my recipe is not a fixed one. So it's not that like if I like want to use SQL first and then want to use Python second and then want to use a Tableau third. That might be like the one path that I take for one particular solution or one particular problem solving. For another one, I actually might start with SQL and do modeling and just go to Excel. Or for third one, I actually might start directly with the modeling tool because my data would have been prepped for another analysis. So I think the path is not the same, or the recipe is not the same, but the common logic or the broad steps are the same. The first step is have extremely robust data pipeline. Now that has to be very, very, very well QC'd and so quality checked and harmonized. Meaning if you have three, let's say, data sources, what week means in first data source, if it's like Monday to Sunday, should be the exact same definition of week in the second data source. If it's like Saturday to Friday, then you have to go back and change it because you cannot combine those two data sources. So you have to kind of look at that level of granularity and work on making sure your data pipeline is robust. That is number one. Number two, and that can happen in SQL, and when you're doing data manipulations in SQL, I always recommend people to create new tables, uh, but don't create a table for every analysis. Create table in such a way that it can be used multiple times. So don't really waste a lot of memory, but keep it very structured because there is so much data that we work with. If you do not keep it structured, you will actually end up with a confused mess. So, that is step number one. Step number two is we work on our models, and we want to make sure when we're working on the models, we are starting with the basics. I don't want my team to start with five features because they feel those are the best features that they've seen traditionally. Traditionally means nothing in our industry. Things change every month, every week. So start with all features. Check for autocorrelation. Do your basics. Do your basic tests. Do not ignore a step there because especially when you're doing a high profile or high value analysis, please do not skip steps. So modeling is number two, and modeling starts with starting with all the features. Starts on a whiteboard basically. For me, every time modeling should start with someone from the business with you because you don't want to kind of miss a feature just because you are new to the organization and did not feel that, oh, that is something that could have also had an impact on our business outcome. So start on a whiteboard, build a model, test the model, and then number three is QA. So it's very important for you to kind of have someone check your code, check your actual analysis and basically do some kind of a user acceptance testing. And then you want to kind of brief your client in a one-on-one setting or a small group setting and then make the final presentation because you want to make sure when you're going into the final room your stakeholders are not surprised, especially the ones who are going to be your champions. Your champions have to be in close contact of yours throughout the process because one example is one very, very large organization. I went in and I told the the marketing team that the money has to be shifted, or and marketing and sales officers, chief marketing and chief sales officers, that the money had to be shifted from sales to marketing. So it was a very big thing, right? And you could basically almost certainly every time expect for the C level to be pretty upset about it because it's a big thing. But then we did not really have any of that because everybody was pre-wired. Everybody knew kind of what to expect. So we came out of the room very productive way. We came out with a plan versus with the versus with some resistance or back and forth. So pre-wire stakeholders, and last but not the least, what you present on your slides or in that final readout has to be robust, has to be you cannot leave even one loophole in that, because I've seen years and years of work go to trash. If there was even one loophole in the final analysis, because think about it, people especially when you're talking about a big change, people are looking for reasons not to change. And if you give them even one reason for not to changing, they will basically use that one reason and not change. so
Yeah.
so make sure your final analysis and readout is foolproof.
Yeah. What I really like about that is it's how it all ties in together. And what sort of comes to my mind is it's almost like, and I don't know if this actually exists. I haven't seen it, because you need to, there's quite
Yeah,
a few steps in building out your pipeline, building out
yeah,
your processes, right? And you need to
yeah,
keep the stakeholders engaged. So there
yeah,
almost needs to be a tool out there which gives periodic updates on where you're at, where you're at in terms of data collection, where you're at in terms of your modeling, and
yeah.
just getting executives to see, to have visibility over what is being done at every step. And then when you get to the end, when you showcase the visualization, when you're trying to tell the story, there is no surprises. There's more just uh, recognition of what the decision needs to be, or
Exactly.
the decision that makes complete sense. And I don't know if there is a tool available that does that. But I think there would be an opportunity there.
Yeah.
One Yeah, maybe something for Enterprise DNA to have a look have a look into in the
Yeah.
future. Maybe something for our analyst hub app that we've got. But anyway, I digress. Now, a couple more questions, I think, because this has been
Sure.
great, and we're moving along nicely here.
Uh-huh.
I think the data pipeline one is a good one to dive into, because this is quite a lot of listeners I would guess historically are just your general analysts. They're Excel users. Maybe they use Tableau now. Maybe they use Power BI. I think there is an underappreciation around what it takes to actually build out the data pipeline itself, to actually
Uh-huh.
get the data, to bring multiple different data sources together, to sort of model it up in some of your IT infrastructure, so on and so forth. I was wanting to get your perspective or advice on how could someone on the front line, say a business user or someone maybe in just sales, if they
Uh-huh.
want the insight, if they want something unique, some unique analysis done, what do you think the best approach for them is to get something started around building out a data pipeline? I mean, and another way to think of it is, you've obviously had experience starting something up from scratch within some
Mhm.
of these larger orgs. So how did you go about starting to build out these data pipelines? Assessing the data you need, bringing it all together. What did you do, and or what would your advice be?
No, good question. So I think the starting point is to basically start with what exactly is the need. Now, this is the need from the business. This is the need from your leadership. Start with what exactly are the questions that are unsolved and the ones that organization wants to get answered. Once you have all those questions, basically do a prioritization. What of those questions need to be answered first? What are the questions that can wait 6 months? What are the questions that are good to have in the next 2 years? So once you have that pipeline in terms of the opportunities, in terms of the questions that need to be answered, try and draw a very simple data map for the organization. Meaning okay, so if the first question is, what am I going to do in sales next year? Okay, good question. What exactly do I need to tell you that answer? So I basically need to know your historical sales. I need to know your investments. I need to know what your competition is doing. I need to know how big your market is, and I need to know how it has evolved over the period of time. So basically, try and understand the data points needed to answer that question. How much of those do you have, and what is the quality of the data that you have within those metrics? So You might have all 5 data points, right? But out of five, three might be in like great quality, meaning like, you can triangulate and like, you can match it with external data sources and you'll be pretty close. The other two, not so much because they're not the cleanest. So try and understand, take an inventory of what is the data that you have on hand to answer those questions. And what exactly out of that data is like usable, what exactly out of the data is not that usable. Then try and create a plan on like, what will it take for the organization to complete the picture. Meaning like, okay, so Sam asks Shiv like, to basically do a forecasting. And I basically come back to you and say that two of my five data sources are not in good shape. And I need for you to invest, I don't know, like, $100,000 in like, getting more data in the organization. And that's when I can actually complete it to you and like, complete the analysis for you. Then we do an ROI analysis. So if that 100,000 is truly worth it, because the forecast, let's say like, having a good forecast basically allows for you to plan better investments. And maybe like, that $100,000 investment will render a $10 million in return. So totally worth it. So, so that's when we like, make those decisions. And that's when we kind of, answer some, if not all those questions. Because what a lot of times what I've seen happening is, especially like, when an organization just has an IT department, like, which is like legacy IT, I've seen a lot of times they start with all the data points that are there. I think the organization should start with the questions and then try and go backwards and see, okay, for those questions, what is the data that is needed? Because if you just start with the data, you basically adopt a mindset that, oh, I will only answer the questions that can be answered from the data that I have on hand. And which means like, sometimes your overall performance quality, especially like, the potential that you can get from data science is minimalized. Your competition might be doing it the other way around. So you might be stuck like a frog in like a like a frog in a boiler, and like, you don't even know what exists outside, right? So start with the questions, start with the strategy, start with the vision of the organization, then go backwards. And that's when you will notice the impact is phenomenally more compared to like, starting with what you have.
I love that. It's almost, think of it like an investment portfolio. List out all of the potential opportunities for optimization around decision making or processes, and assess which ones are going, initially assess what are going to make the highest impact, and then that should drive your decisions around what the priorities should be around your data pipeline and building out your data pipeline. So I think that is an awesome insight. Okay, Shiv, why don't we round off with one last question?
Sure.
And this is pretty broad, so I think hopefully you've got some good insights. But what do you think is from your position, sort of the future of where things are going around data and analytics from a broad perspective to also for the individual? What do you think are some of the big trends that are playing out or that you're seeing even happening now?
Nice. Yeah, that is a pretty broad question. So let's see.
Well, one example I can maybe give you one example I've had from a previous guest is automation. So a lot of the insights, and I think this holds true. A lot of the, even though there's been a lot of improvement in automation with tools of late, cutting out a lot of manual work, I think there's the potential to be a lot more. So that's just one example.
Got it. No, that's actually a pretty good example as well. Because yes, I think automation is a future trend, but it is again not new. If you would have asked me that question like 10 years back, I would have still said automation. Because I think that's a part of the process, right? Like, you start with showing the value through minimum viable products, and then you basically scale them. And the way you scale them is by automating, like, the insights that are needed on a regular basis. So instead of like, people doing the same thing again and again, you save time, and like, you basically create create a tool for them to kind of go back to. So I think automation is here to stay. It is definitely a good trend that will be with us for a very long time, not just within data science, across the board. You talk about let's say you start a chocolate factory. You start by making chocolates at home, then you'll basically create a factory, and that is basically automation. so so it is going to stay across the industries. I think from my perspective, the one thing I feel will change, or the big trend to watch out for within data science is, um, data science will not be limited to people who have a statistical background or advanced analytics background. Citizen data scientists, as I said, are going to be much, much, much more common, and people are going to have access to data across all folds of life. So you don't really have to have a corporate job to basically do data crunching. We've seen some of that with the recent COVID-19 trends, right? People in your family, in your friend circle are not talking about positivity rate. They're not talking about the trends, the forecasting of infection and the forecasting of death rates. They're talking about accuracy of vaccines or effectiveness. So what's going to happen is, very shortly, everybody's going to have on their fingertips access to vast amounts of data. And they will basically use data in not just business decision making, but in day-to-day decision making. So, for example, you already would have seen people are looking at the calories that they're eating. They're now calculating the calories that they're eating. Some of them, who are becoming health conscious. They are looking at numbers before making an investment into a stock or into a house. So that's going to become much more common. Even before you respond to a friend, you might actually have a small tool on your phone. When you're going on a dating, you would know, what to ask, what not to ask. And based on your personal situation, based on your own data history, that is where we're going to see a big, big change. And that's where, everybody who comes to me and asks me, oh, so you've been into this domain for a long time, do you still want to be in data science analytics? And my answer is, of course. For the next 30 to 35 years, our job is pretty much needed, not just for businesses, but for every walk and field of life. So data science analytics is here to stay. So if you are listening to this and are in a career which is not related to data science analytics, but are curious about it, I would say hop onto the ship. There's a long, long way for us to go.
Yeah, that's a super insight, and I couldn't agree. One way I frame it is data immersion. We're just immersed. We're going to be immersed. I mean, we're already starting to see it, but I think it's just going to be even more and more and more. Whether that's a good or a bad thing is you could sometimes sometimes debate. But I think generally, just having more information at your fingertips to make a better decision in all walks of life is going to be very important. And I always like to think as well that, and this sort of goes on what you just mentioned about the opportunity over the next 20 to 30 years. I mean, it's just always going to be there. There's this blue ocean of opportunity right now that is just waiting to be unlocked in all walks of life, from business to individual needs. It just goes on and on and on. There's just mountains of opportunity, which is so exciting. Being in this space right now at this time.
100%. 100%.
Well, Shiv, that was I think we've almost gone for an hour, which is a little bit over what we normally do. But this has just been a fascinating discussion, and have really enjoyed hearing your varied perspective on things, and being able to leverage off your experience. And I'm sure the listeners will also gain a lot out of it. Maybe do you want to, if anyone wants to maybe reach out, is there because obviously there's you're building a team yourself, and have a lot of experience. So is there any easy way for people to do that?
That's a good question. So I would say LinkedIn is a great medium to reach out to me. So drop me a message, or add me, or connect me, or follow me. But that's a good way to reach out to me. If they want to kind of email me, they can connect to you, and you can send them my way.
Sounds good. Yep, we'll make sure to put all relevant links around in the descriptions of the podcast, and also when we release this on YouTube. So, okay, let's wrap things up. Really appreciate it, Shiv, and thanks all for tuning in to the Analytic Mind podcast. Hopefully, you're getting a lot out of our content. I know myself, I'm learning a lot personally. So it's really great to get such experienced guests on. And look forward to doing much more of this, and maybe Shiv, we could circle back in the future and get you back on again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, thanks all. Take care.